Hey, just a quick heads up that because of the topic, this video is going to contain some sweeping, swooshy camera motions, as well as some jittering and stuttering. If you're prone to motion sickness, grab a can of ginger ale or something. Good afternoon everyone, how's it going? Let's cut to the chase. Starcraft 2's cameras are a weird, arcane system that don't play nice. They're hard to work with and harder to get to do what you want them to. I'm going to try to help you fix that. Start right from the ground floor. Make a camera. Click the camera editor up here, position yourself in the viewport somewhere in your map, and click the Create Camera button. If you don't like where you put it, move the viewport and, with the camera selected, click Set Camera to Current View. When you create a camera, it inherits every aspect of your viewport camera, position in X, Y, and Z, rotation, tilt, yaw, distance, and everything else in this list. Double-click on the camera in the list and select Camera to open its Properties menu, and click on the Preview in Terrain Editor checkbox to get a live preview of anything you change. But don't worry about any of these variables right now, we'll come back to them. Now, create a trigger to get us into our camera. We could do it on map start, but I like controlling when things kick off, so I'll be using my go-to of putting down this disk to know where things are, adding a region on top of it, and setting up a trigger that starts when this medic enters that region. What we want the trigger to do is apply camera object. Select our camera from the list, and that's it for the first step. As one final bit of convenience, select the melee initialization trigger and add an action to reveal area, selecting entire map, and setting the duration of the reveal to 0 seconds, which actually means forever. Now, give it a test. Yep, that's the camera we set up, but the UI is in the way, so let's get rid of it. Back to the trigger we just made, add a new cinematic mode action, and set it to on. The default is 2 seconds, which lets the letterboxing slide in nice and fancy, but I like going directly into things, so let's set that to 0. While we're here, let's change the duration that the camera gets applied over. Also set that to 0 so we just snap directly into it. Great, so we have a camera. That's not very exciting, and you probably could have figured this one out on your own. Time to make another camera. From our same viewpoint, view it by selecting the camera from the list, then clicking View Selected Camera, hit Create Camera again. Zoom back out a bit so you can see them, then select the second one from the list over here and move it off to the side. Just directly to one side, not facing a different direction. Use the arrow handles to make sure. Head back to the trigger and add a second Apply Camera object. Select the second camera. Set a duration that seems reasonable, I'll do 5 seconds, and you're good to go. But let's say we want this camera to end facing a different direction, like we're sliding over and turning. Just go ahead and change what direction the second camera's facing, use whatever, then give it a test. Well, we got there, but it wasn't quite the effect I expected. I think it would be cool to slide over and then turn, but that doesn't work. Also, see how it moved kind of weird? Before moving on, let's talk about distance. Camera distance is one of the most important things to pay attention to when it comes to getting these things to behave themselves. As it turns out, the graphic used for the camera in the editor is pretty literal. The camera itself is at the end of that long arrow like it was on a stick, while its origin point, what it will rotate around, is what the arrow is pointing at. And just like real life, trying to maneuver it around when it's on a stick that's too long can get pretty unwieldy, introducing movement you don't expect. This can matter in more ways than just awkward movement, as a camera on a long enough stick, with a far enough distance, can actually get caught on doodads or even terrain. The simple solution is just to set the camera's distance lower. I typically set my cameras to distance 3 or 2. I found that this offers me the best amount of control in tight spaces while avoiding the jittery motion that can sometimes come from anything lower. It's important to note that distance doesn't matter much when it comes to what a camera will actually display. 2 cameras with different distances can still be made to show the same thing, it may just take some repositioning. Keeping consistency with your distances, or condistancy, is going to make your life much easier. With our cameras now set to a more helpful distance and properly repositioned, try out the movement we just made again. Much better, but maybe not exactly what was intended still. When you're applying a camera object, the camera translates linearly between the 2 points. As you go along the path, the properties of the second camera will be applied incrementally, corresponding to how far along that path the camera is. In less nerdy terms, it gets more like the thing the closer it is to it. If we set our first camera to angle 0 and our second camera to angle 100, then tell the second camera to apply over 10 seconds, 1 second into the action, our camera will be facing angle 10. 2 seconds in and we're facing angle 20, so on and so forth. This isn't something we can change, so what do? We add a third camera. Duplicate our first camera like we did before, then slide it over until it's pretty close to the one that's facing the other direction. For everyone's sanity, I'm going to be renaming these cameras 1, 2, and 3 from left to right. Now just set up the trigger like before, going from 1 to 2 to 3. Don't worry about any other variables just yet, and give it a test. Well, that didn't work. What happened? Believe it or not, everything. Just like it was supposed to. Trigger events in StarCraft 2 fire off from top to bottom, but beyond that, they may as well all happen at the same time. When we started our trigger, it started the first action, enter cinematic mode. Right afterward, it applied camera 1. This done, it went on to camera 2, that's when we started moving. Now the thing is, StarCraft doesn't care that the effects of this action aren't done, it only cares that it successfully started it. So, having done that, it moves on to the next one. It doesn't matter what duration you tell the second camera to apply over, the fact that it started moving is enough. We need to tell it to wait. Add a wait action between the second and third camera, and set the duration to the same number we're applying the camera over. Cameras deal with real-time numbers, so also set that option. Now things are looking a little better. Not great, though. You'll notice that the camera stops entirely before starting its turn. This is very simple. We told the trigger to wait for exactly as long as we applied the camera, so it gets to complete its motion before the next one starts. To get smoother motion, a nice slide and turn, set the wait duration to 4 seconds. Don't worry about why for now, we'll get to it soon. Now our camera swoops into place a little more gracefully, but it's still not perfect. Let's take a look at some of the other variables inside a camera. These two here, initial velocity and deceleration, are the real keys. Initial velocity is how fast the camera should be moving when it's first applied. It's currently on existing velocity for everything, which is actually what we want. This means that when a new camera object is applied, it should start its movement at the same speed it was already traveling, keeping its momentum. We could set this to a specific number, which I usually do for the first camera in a sequence if I want the initial motion to be fast or slow. Since we're applying a camera with no motion first, camera 1 in this case, camera 2's initial velocity is 0. If we changed this to 50, it would start much faster, 50% of the total speed it would attain while traveling from its position to that of the next camera over the duration we specified, and obviously it would get even faster if you set it to 100%. Of course, its top speed is still capped by the duration you set and the distance it's traveling, so keep your high school algebra in mind. The deceleration value is where things start coming together. Notice again how our camera slows down as it reaches the end of its first target. This is because of its default 10% deceleration, which in turn affects the initial velocity of camera 3. Setting this to 0 means that it won't slow down at all, and the next camera in the sequence will inherit the full movement that the previous camera was already operating under. This, finally, is how you get smooth camera motion across a complex path. But there's still more. Now that our movement values are settled, let's revisit why we set our wait action lower than the apply duration. What we've been doing is building a path, with each camera object acting as a goal that the actual in-game camera, our viewpoint, is trying to reach. If we kept the duration and wait values the same, the camera would just travel from one to the other very stiffly. Or here, because deceleration is set to 0, you can see that the camera's momentum actually carries it past its target, another thing to watch out for. By telling the camera to start moving towards the next goal before fully reaching the one before, we're creating a curve. The difference between the applied duration and the weight value controls the angle of that curve, until we go back to ignoring the second camera entirely and skipping straight to the third with a weight value of 0. So this is typically how my camera setups look. The first camera that gets us into place with an initial velocity of 0, the first camera to start moving with an initial velocity of whatever I think the scene needs, and a deceleration of 0, and then existing velocity for any cameras that come after so they inherit the motion I want. By making more cameras and keeping this baton passing going, you can pretty quickly get the hang of really complicated camera movements. One thing I found, though, is to always use more than just the 2 cameras for a big change in angle like the one we've been doing. I typically go for 3 cameras, one where it already is to lead things in, one about halfway through, and then a final one at the full desired angle. In my experience, this has let me tweak things a little more finely, as sometimes trying to change an angle too quickly or too much at once has led to weird results or just not really moving the way I'd like it to. Then you can start adjusting the camera apply and weight durations to get something even smoother, and before you know it, you have some slick, smooth camera paths. As with a lot of things in the Starcraft 2 editor, especially when trying to use it for animation, the best results are going to come down to regular old experimentation and practice. My goal here wasn't to necessarily explain absolutely everything to infinite detail, but to help you get past what were massive roadblocks for me when I was just getting started. I had to figure a lot of this stuff out on my own, and I hope that this video reaches people so they don't need to go through the same thing. There really is just too much to cover, and definitely no true secret to 100% perfect cameras without any effort. You're going to be testing and readjusting this stuff a lot, that's just how it's going to be. But, stick with it. I believe in you. Alright, thanks as always for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Till next time.